Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Well, we had a great second day of the spring conference last Friday, held online, and I had the privilege of chairing the session with Mark Heath on preparing for the parliamentary general elections. Treating everyone equally is absolutely key. That and, of course, seeking advice where it's needed. But the LGA have been giving a lot of consideration to the election, haven't they, Dennis, and what they want the next government to particularly focus on?
The LGA have issued a white paper setting out their demands for our sector from the next government. And they say local government is the key to solving some of our biggest national challenges. And with the general election taking place in a few weeks, now must be a time for change and new hope. So let's look further at this. The Local Government Association has called on the next government to support equal partnership between local and national government, sufficient funding with multi-year settlements, and new powers for councils to help service delivery. It warned that without funding reform, councils of all political colours and types could be in a position where they cannot meet their statutory duties. The demands are part of a wide-ranging local government white paper published on the 7th of June that called for immediate change to tackle the sector's biggest challenges, including better support for children, homeless families, adults who draw on care and support, and on climate change. And the new white paper also pressed the government for longer-term reform and set out the following 5 priorities it believes could drive change. First, an equal, respectful partnership between local and national government, a genuine partnership backed by statute and based on best international practice. Second, sufficient and sustainable funding with multi-year settlements and combined funding pots so that local services can develop and transform. Third, backing local government as place leaders with new powers to bring partners together to get services working better and drive inclusive growth and regulate failing markets. Fourth, a new focus on prevention and services for the wider community, and joint action with the NHS to keep people well from birth to later life, alongside action on housing and homelessness. And fifth, innovation and freedom from bureaucracy, ending bureaucratic reporting and exploiting the full potential of technology, including artificial intelligence. As part of the white paper, the LGA published new analysis that suggested councils in England now face a funding gap of £6.2 billion over the next 2 years. And according to the LGA, the shortfall is being driven by rising cost and demand pressures to provide adult social care, children's services, homelessness support, and home-to-school transport for children with special educational needs and disabilities. Without funding reform, the LGA warned that cost and demand pressures will continue to stretch council budgets to the limit in the coming years, leaving more councils of all political colours and types unable to deliver their legal duties. Now, the white paper also called for the next government to commission a review of public services reform, aimed at understanding how all public services can work together within their local communities. Other proposals included providing councils and combined authorities with powers to build more affordable, good quality homes at scale with 5-year local housing deals for all areas of the country that want them. It also called for reforms to adult social care to ensure that it is better funded and ensure that councils and the NHS work better together. Now, this paper and its 5 key asks would be transformational in nature. So let's see how the major parties respond. Helen.
Well, let's see. Now, sticking with the general election, the government have issued candidate security guidance to help everyone involved in the elections keep safe. It's a sad state of affairs that we've reached the point where this is necessary, and there have been already reports of abuse and intimidation centred around candidates in particular. I mean, from a range of political spectrums: Rosie Duffield, Jess Phillips, Caroline Noakes, all female. So for candidates, the government has recommended taking up the full cyber security offer from the National Cyber Security Centre, together with reading guidance on how to improve information security and where to go if affected by online disinformation. And there's more information on detailed cyber security guidance for high-risk individuals, understanding when behaviour goes beyond political debate and may be unlawful, and of course further information on social media, both securing accounts and reporting content. For protective security, the government recommends that candidates and political staff read protective security guidance for high-risk individuals, which is guidance on how individuals can protect themselves, staff and family from a range of threats to personal safety and security. Joint guidance on intimidation for candidates in elections. This is guidance from the National Police Chiefs Council, the Crown Prosecution Service and the Electoral Commission for candidates and campaigners. And additional protective security guidance, which is about securing your digital footprint and understanding and mitigating the risk from social engineering and social media exploitation. For cybersecurity, the government recommends candidates and political staff read account and device cyber guidance, website and email domain cyber guidance for high-risk individuals. This is that in particular is national cybersecurity advice for individuals who already have their own website or their custom email domain, or indeed intend to set one up. There's guidance for political organisations, which outlines the cyber threat to UK political organisations and measures to prevent successful attacks, and then social media security information for candidates. There's really quite an extensive amount of guidance out there, and that's dismaying in itself. For electoral staff, again, the government recommends online disinformation and AI threat guidance for electoral candidates and officials. And this outlines mitigations to disrupt the impact of disinformation campaigns, which are increasingly created using generative AI, and I think rather a newcomer to the political landscape. There's a lot to get through, Dennis, and all the links are available in the LLG Bulletin, and it's also worth noting that the Electoral Commission itself has produced guidance on harassment and intimidation specifically. Now, it's been quite a while since we've taken a look at the PO inquiry, and this time it's the time of the judiciary involved in the original criminal hearings. Dennis.
Yes, indeed. Well, the inquiry is moving on apace, recently focusing on the role of the Post Office Board and also the role of external lawyers. But what about the role of the judges who heard the cases themselves, those cases that have since been overturned? Let's take a look at what commentators are saying about this particular aspect. Judges failed postmasters who were wrongly convicted in at least a dozen cases in the country's biggest miscarriage of justice, a former director of public prosecutions has said. Sir David Calvert-Smith, DPP from 1998 to 2003, and himself a retired High Court judge, was instructed by the Post Office to lead a review in 2020 of over 900 prosecutions of postmasters by the Post Office. Chairing a panel at the Bar Council's conference in London the other week on reforming private prosecutions in the wake of the scandal, he was asked if he thought that some judges had let down the sub-postmasters. Calvert-Smith replied, "Yes, I think that is certainly true in probably about a dozen of the cases I read when I went through them, maybe more." And he told the conference, surely a judge would have poked a bit more deeply into this rather than thinking, I've got a full list, I want to get on with the next case. However, in February, the Lady Chief Justice Baroness Carr of Walton-on-the-Hill rejected any suggestion that judges had been at fault. At her first press conference after being appointed, she said, "I don't accept that there is any basis for implicating the judiciary in any of these wrongful convictions, so far as I can see." She stressed that juries, not judges, decide guilt, and in cases where postmasters represented by lawyers pleaded guilty, it was not for the judges to go behind that plea. However, barrister Flora Page, who represented 3 postmasters in the Court of Appeal and is currently acting for more in the Post Office inquiry, told the Bar Conference that some judges had failed by not ordering disclosure of material that would have exposed the bugs and faults in the Horizon software. Now, the ongoing inquiry into the scandal has heard evidence of failings and alleged cover-ups by the Post Office and its lawyers, which led to the wrongful prosecutions and convictions. To prevent future miscarriages of justice, Page suggested that there should be greater scrutiny of companies or organisations that have a standing internal private prosecution function. She said that internal prosecution functions should be required to report to the company's main board at least annually, and they should be subject to a compulsory code of conduct and inspection by HM Crown Prosecution Service Inspectorate. Interesting, Helen.
Well, it's about embedding checks and balances, Dennis. Now, taken from the LGA Bulletin, more than 250,000 social rented homes in England have been lost in the last decade, according to analysis of government statistics. Between April 2013 and April 2023, the number of social housing homes owned by local authorities and housing associations in England fell by 260,464 units. This data is according to the charity Shelter, which calculated the figures. The fall has been attributed to a combination of property demolitions, the right to buy scheme, and housing providers converting social rented accommodation into more expensive, quote, affordable housing. LGA Housing spokesperson, Councillor Claire Holland, said, quote, councils can play a critical role in solving this country's housing crisis if they are given the powers and resources to build more of the genuinely affordable homes our communities desperately need. Now, referencing back to the LGA White Paper, Dennis, that you mentioned earlier, that does set out a range of proposals for whoever forms the next government to boost housing supply, and it includes granting 5-year local housing deals, which combines national funding for all areas of the country that want them. Now, meanwhile, in other news, a survey from Carers UK has found that almost 2/3 of unpaid carers, and that's equivalent to 10 million people, had no choice other than to take on the role themselves because of the lack of availability of social care. Now, chairman of the LGA's Community Wellbeing Board, David Fothergill, said, quote, our local government white paper calls for more support for unpaid carers and a renewed focus on prevention. And it is crucial that whoever forms the next government should work to support them to continue their vital role. Investing more in early action is fundamental to ensuring someone can continue living independently in the home and community they love. And there's coverage also in the Express and Daily Mail on that. Now, Dennis, have you ever parked your car only to return and find it missing? Normally, this is a slip of the brain, but not for one woman. Tell us more.
Well, indeed. And, you know, we do look for that odd or curious story that is a little quirky or unusual. And perhaps I think we have one here. So, as Helen says, good advice, be careful where you park your car. Here's more on this. A woman has been left without her car for over a year because a council forgot to inform her that it had been towed away due to roadworks. Madeline Roos assumed that her 15-year-old Citroën had been stolen when she discovered it was missing from its usual parking space in February 2023, and she reported it to the police and then received a payout from her insurer on the assumption that the car had actually been stolen. 12 months later, a letter from Sheffield City Council notified her that her car had been removed for contravening temporary parking restrictions. She was told that the vehicle would be destroyed if she did not collect it within 2 days and pay a fine and charges, including a £12 a day storage fee. Storage costs had racked up to over £4,400 when the notice had been received. Now, South Yorkshire Police admitted that they'd been alerted by the council that the car had been removed in case it was reported missing. However, staff failed to inform Roos when she reported it as stolen. She said, "I left my car as usual on a street that usually has unrestricted parking and did not see any warning signs. My insurer, Hastings Direct, paid me £2,190 for the so-called theft, but because it was recorded as an at-fault claim and I'm on a low income, I could no longer now afford to insure a car." Sheffield Parking Services blamed staffing issues and changes in processes when Roos complained about the year-long delay and claimed it could not have anticipated her situation, since we do not usually get a response to these letters. It agreed to waive the fine and all fees after the Guardian newspaper intervened, and Joe Otten, the chair of the council's Waste and Street Scene Committee, said, "This was an unacceptable failure of process, and there will be a thorough investigation and review of our systems to prevent further incidents like this. We're in contact with Miss Roos and will be paying her appropriate compensation." Helen.
Oh dear, Dennis. Now, it's been a while since we discussed OFLOG, but it's back in the news with a report by the local government lawyer about those early conversations OFLOG said it would be having with council showing signs of failure. Now, Adam Carey, writing for the local government lawyer, set out that the chief executive of the Office for Local Government has reported a, quote, successful first pilot of its early warning conversations programme, but noted that tweaks were still needed before rolling it out this year or next. Writing in a letter to the chair of the Levelling Up Housing and Communities Committee, Clive Betts, the chief executive of OFLOG, Josh Goodman, said a trial run with Oxfordshire County Council had shown the process has the, quote, potential to add value, but that a second pilot is needed. Now, this programme is part of OFLOG's early warning system, which is aimed at spotting signs of potential serious failure in local authorities. And the early warning conversations component involves sending in a review team to local authorities identified as potentially at risk. Again, we're not clear exactly how they're being identified as potentially at risk from the data metrics, but Goodman noted that Oxfordshire's chief executive had said that the overall process seems considered and robust, while acknowledging that modifications will need to be made, which was the main point of the trial run. So he at least seems convinced, because he also added that OFLOG should conduct a second pilot in order to amend and then test the model again before conducting a real early warning conversation. So it will be interesting to see who receives that first early warning conversation. So in the initial pilot in Oxfordshire, OFLOG worked with a review team consisting of a serving chief executive and a section 151 officer. But Goodman said at the time that a real early warning conversation should typically comprise a team that includes a serving or recent chief exec, a section 151 officer, and the serving or recent leader of a different local authority. And he also noted that OFLOG intends to publish a report at the end of an early warning conversation that will set out the type and degree of risks to the authority's leadership, governance and culture, and then make recommendations for improvement and support. He further said that factual content of the report will, where possible, be agreed by the local authority. Now, according to the letter, OFLOG's current plans include asking the local authority to publish a written response to the public in respect of OFLOG's report, outlining the action they're going to take moving forward, but it's not clear whether it will set guidelines or prescriptions about the format of that response yet. So we've still got quite a few questions. Now, it's interesting, Dennis, and notably, there's one principal person missing from the team OFLOG considers necessary, and that's the monitoring officer, the person responsible for ensuring maladministration is avoided and appropriately dealt with if found. And given the Ombudsman's understanding of the significance of that role, it's rather alarming that OFLOG wants to concentrate just purely on a review team consisting of chief executive and 151 officer, with maybe the leader, which is completely ignoring the importance of the Golden Triangle and the pivotal role the MO plays, and of course flies in the face of everything we've embedded in our code for statutory officers, which we released at the spring conference. So definitely feel a letter coming on, Dennis. And on that note, you can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 21, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too.
Have a good week.